Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so we are in the book of Daniel, and book of Daniel is split up in different ways. Half of it is like biological story, and biological, is that right? No, that's not right. Biological. Biographical. There we go. This is going to be good today. Tune in. Take notes, people. We're going to confuse you. So biographical. I don't know what biological story would be. I guess that would be kind of other stuff. But biographical story of Daniel's life and other people that were in captivity. And that's half. And then half the book is also written in Aramaic. And then half the book is written in Hebrew. And so what we're moving into today is the last book that's in Aramaic, but it pushes into the prophetic part of the book. So chapters 7 through 12 are prophetic books. And so they're not chronological anymore. They're more kind of visions that Daniel had during captivity. And so prophecy is interesting because what I've found in the church is that some Christians make prophecy the main course. And it's what they become all about. And it's almost like, prophecy and having it nailed and having it right and knowing that's kind of the way that you know God. It kind of becomes like that. And then I found that other Christians make it kind of like, hey, what do you want to eat for dinner? I don't care, anything. Or what do you want to watch? Doesn't matter. I don't care. I don't have an opinion. And so there's somewhere in the middle that we need to end up. Somewhere in the middle where our hearts and our lives are humbly seeking after Jesus, to know him and walking with him, and then also understanding some of the prophetic of things to come, because what we're speaking of today is no less than the end of the world. Like God's perspective shared with us, like, hey, this is what's going to happen. You can take it to the bank. And God has a great track record of doing that. So today, we're going to gain perspective on the temporary kingdoms of the world and the eternal kingdom of God. And the reason we pay attention to the bigger picture of the things that God shares is they're applicable to our everyday life. So just as we look at temporary kingdoms today that are ruling over in time and space, and we look that God's kingdom is the higher throne that's always there. You look at that and you say, well, I don't know that I have interactions with all these kingdoms too much, but do you have something that is keeping you down today? Do you have a sickness or something that's coming after you today? Do you have a person that's coming after you today? Do you have an experience or a failure or any of those things that seems like it's bigger than anything else in your life today? Well, you could be encouraged that it's temporary, that it's just a temporary kingdom in your life. And there's a higher throne, and God, the one that loves you, is upon it. And so let's read Daniel 7, verse 1, and we're going to see 4 great beasts. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream, and visions passed through his mind as he was lying in bed. He wrote down the substance of his dream. So Daniel is not chronological anymore, like we said. Daniel 7 takes place chronologically between Daniel chapter 4 and Daniel chapter 5. And so we go back in a period, and he shares this vision. So Daniel was in a sort of retirement during this time. So he was in his 80s, late 80s, maybe early 90s. And he has this vision of what is to come. And we probably have memories or muscle memory of if we've read Revelation with, right, the Apostle John. John was in his 80s and 90s, and he was put on the island of Patmos, and God revealed to him the book of Revelation during that time. And so you have many parallels. Daniel chapter 7 would be somewhat parallel with Revelation chapter 13, if you want to follow along with that. And so verse 2, it says, Daniel said, in my vision at night, I looked, and there before me were the 4 winds of heaven, churning up the great sea. 4 great beasts, each different from the others, came up out of the sea. The first was like a lion, and it had the wings of an eagle. I watched until its wings were torn off, and it was lifted from the ground, so that it stood on 2 feet like a human being, and the mind of a human was given to it. And there before me was a second beast. All right. I'm not thinking about the beach, I promise. A second beast, which looked like a bear. It was raised up on one of its sides, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. It was told, "Get up and eat your fill of flesh." After that I looked, and there before me was another beast, one that looked like a leopard, and on its back it had 4 wings like those of a bird. This beast had 4 heads, and it was given authority to rule. After that, in my vision at night, I looked, and there before me was a 4th beast, terrifying and frightening and very powerful. It had large iron teeth. It was crushed and devoured its victims and trampled underfoot whatever was left. It was different from all the former beasts, and it had 10 horns. So in reading these 4 beasts, we're reminded of the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had in Daniel chapter 2. If you weren't here for that or haven't read it before, this king has a dream, and he's the king where Daniel is, and he sees the nations of the world that are going to happen. They're the Gentile nations, basically the major empires of history. But he sees them as a human being put together in different stages. You'll notice that the number 4 is used throughout this. 4 beasts that come out, and the number 4 typically it can speak of God's creative work in history or in someone's life, but then also the number 4 stands for totality. So you and I need to understand that these empires that are spoken of here, it's speaking of the totality of the Gentile empires of all of history. And if we read correctly, there's not any major thing to come except for a little bit of revitalization of the Roman Empire. And so much of this has already happened, and there's just a tidbit that needs to happen more. And also, too, notice that the United States is not a part of this, because we actually don't compare to any of these empires, partly because the United States hasn't decided to take over the world. Like, in other words, we haven't gone into countries and taken over all the countries. That's what these empires did, is they just took over and took over and took over. So Nebuchadnezzar saw the beast as an image of man instead, and the dream explained really the most complete prophecy of empires, along with this, what we're reading today. The Babylonian Empire in Nebuchadnezzar's dream was a head of gold, and that was 605 to 539 BC. The Medo-Persian Empire was the chest and arms of silver, 539 to 331 BC. And then the Greek Empire showed a belly and thighs of bronze, 331 to 146 BC was the Greek Empire. And then the Roman Empire was legs of iron, 146 to 395 AD. And then it also spoke of there was 10 toes on there, and that would represent 10 kings. And some people get confused and say it's nations, but it speaks of kings, 10 kings that would represent nations. And there's a restored Roman Empire, and then it speaks of God's kingdom that would be a stone that would come and crush the entire, all the empires, and they would fall down. And so we read similar vision in Daniel right now, but they're not seen as parts of a man, but beasts. And so think about that. We process things differently, and God speaks to us in ways that we can understand. So that God would help Nebuchadnezzar understand the empires of the world, he showed them in the way of a man. Because humans, we're pretty impressed. We're pretty impressed by gold and silver and bronze and iron and these things. And yet God doesn't call it in the statue of a man from his perspective. He calls what we've done beasts. That the carnage that we've put onto each other since our creation and the way that we've walked in this life, in this world, he calls what we've done beasts. So we need to think about that. The first beast was like a lion, and that was the Babylonian Empire, head of gold in Nebuchadnezzar's dream. And we see Nebuchadnezzar's journey in that, right? You may remember Nebuchadnezzar because he interacted with God in a prideful way, and God caused him to go into the wilderness for years, and then he finally, when he recognized God, he came back. So the lion with its wings being torn off, and then it has the heart of a human. That's the picture of his journey there. The second beast was like a bear, which was the Medo-Persian Empire, and the bear was from Kansas City, because did you notice, if you're following along, it had 3 ribs in its mouth. You know what I'm saying? It had some barbecue. So the third beast was like a leopard, and that's probably the Grecian Empire under Alexander the Great. And the kingdom was passed not on to Alexander the Great's children, because he didn't have any children that we know of. He was passed on to his 4 generals. And so that's where we see the 4 heads of the leopard. And then the last beast was the Roman Empire, a fearful beast that doesn't exist. He couldn't come up with some sort of beast to show the Roman Empire. And it's interesting, the language used for the first 3 beasts, or the first 3 empires in history, were actually, and oh, by the way, chronologically, just so you know, the only empire that was happening during this time was the Babylonian Empire. And then the Medo-Persian Empire was about to take over. So this is all, we look back and we'll say, well, no big deal. We know that happened. But this is all written down in prophecy about what would come. And so we can take it to the bank that this has happened, so we can also look and say what it says hasn't happened yet is going to happen as well. And so the language used for the first 3 beasts is a language of it was given to them, these empires, right? It was prophecy that Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon, kingdom of Babylon, would come and take over Israel and take them into captivity. And Habakkuk and others, were just, no way, God, this can't happen. These prophets, like, how can you use, an evil nation to do this? And God says, oh, I'll use whoever I want. And so these first 3 empires were actually used by God to do what he wanted. And even though they didn't know him, and it was the verbs that are used there are passive. And yet when it comes to the Roman Empire, the verbs are used like they're active verbs. So in other words, those first 3 empires, they were just like kind of doing what they were given. But then the Roman Empire, there was this volition that was taking over, and that's why it was so fierce. And this lion, was transformed to a human. Bear was given permission to eat. Leper was given authority to rule, right? All passive. But then in this 4th empire, the 10 horns, it reminds the 10 toes of Nebuchadnezzar's dream, 10 kings. And horns in Scripture represent power. And so God is spotlighting the 4 world-dominating empires of the Gentiles. Nebuchadnezzar and humans see the empires as human, yet God sees them as beasts. So next we'll gain information that was not in Nebuchadnezzar's dream, right? So God's expanding upon this picture through Daniel now. So we now see a little horn. Verse 8, it says, while I was thinking about the horns, there before me was another horn, a little one, which came up among them, and 3 of the first horns were uprooted before it. This horn had eyes like the eyes of a human being, and a mouth that spoke boastfully. So there will be a partnership of 10 kings in the last days. And the kings that rule, the nations that they rule, will be nations that were formerly associated with the Roman Empire. And so these kings are the 10 horns or the 10 toes found in Daniel chapter 2 or Daniel chapter 7. In the 1950s, the nations of Europe began to form together in partnership. Naturally, they had just been through World War II and Europe was desolated, but they began to form together in ways that would bring together some of the remnants of this Roman Empire. And right about the same time, the nation of Israel came together again in 1948. It had actually been destroyed during the Roman Empire, and then it needed to be a nation again so that all of this that we read here could happen. So right around the time that those that could be these 10 kings began to form together, and then the nation of Israel within just a few years became a nation again for all of this to happen. Now this 11th horn that arises that takes over the 3 horns, he grabs them up from their roots. And Daniel notices that the little horn has eyes like the eyes of a human being and a mouth that spoke boastfully. So eyes and speech throughout the Old Testament speak of one's character. And so what we see here is there's arrogance and irreverence and wickedness amongst this 11th horn. So the 11th horn is the Antichrist. Now, there's many antichrists. John writes in his letter in 1 John chapter 2, verse 18, he says that many antichrists have come. That's the New Testament. But then the Antichrist will come. And so know that while this speaks of ultimately one Antichrist that embodies this spirit the most, there's many Antichrists that have come. Jesus spoke of many false prophets that would come, and that they've come, and there are many will come. So there's two main views that eschatology grows out of. Eschatos, the last things. And there's a Roman view and there's a Greek view. So the Roman view sees, they're pretty much the same till you get to the iron legs. The Roman view views these as the Roman Empire. And the idea there is that then this Roman Empire will be revived, and then the Antichrist will come out of that, like we just spoke about. The Greek view sees the iron legs as Greece. And it would see, if people take it to the extreme, they would see that general and leader Antiochus Epiphanes, he came and fulfilled much of what we see about the Antichrist, even to the point that he came and set up and worshipped other gods in the temple and desolated the temple in Jerusalem. And there was 3.5 years after that period. So there's many things that line up with that. But the failure that we can make, or not the failure, but I guess just kind of the error that we can make when we look at prophecy, is that the people that are seeing prophecy, it's kind of like when you go up, you're driving to Denver, or to the mountains, the Rocky Mountains. As you get closer and closer, especially if you're flying on a plane, and you're just kind of even level with the mountains, you see these peaks, right? The peaks kind of look like they're all at the same level, kind of like right near each other. And yet, if you were to hike or to really fly over the Rocky Mountains, you would see that they're many, many miles apart. But just looking at the front of them, you see these peaks all lined up together. Like even all the graphics, or if you have a sticker of the Rocky Mountains, you'll just see, and all the peaks are together. That's how Daniel and others would see prophecy. They see all these peaks together. They don't necessarily know the distance in between the different things that are happening. And so I think that a person could take part of the Greek view and part of the Roman view, and then humbly say, this is going to happen, and it is happening. And yet God has layers that he rolls out over time. And we are to keep our hearts tuned into him, right? Jesus, when he talked about him coming back, says, when I return, will I find faith on the earth? And the interesting thing is you all and I have faith today. Yet what do we have faith in? Like some of you may be getting notifications on your phone right now. And it's buzzing at you, and it's asking you to tune in. During worship today, I saw a few people, no condemnation here. I'm not, okay, relax. But I'm just saying, it's interesting. I was thinking about it. We have our phones, and they notify us, right? And they notify us, and what do? Pull it out. Oh, something, right? And it's interesting. Some people's depth can just be to that depth. That our whole life is in this little phone and just notifies us. And when we need to know something, we look at it and we go to it, and we trade stocks on there. We look at it. Our whole life is on there. But what does that tell us? It tells us we are designed for that. And yet many people, their faith is just that simple and that kind of flat. And yet we were made for God. And yet just like tuning into our notifications on our phone, many people have turned off notifications with God. And when we talk about these things today, it's like, well, I don't know. And yet it's right before us. This was written hundreds of years before these things happened. And then it's speaking of a time to come. And yet people say, well, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, somebody beat my score on Candy Crush, or is that a game even anymore? What's the game everybody do now, right? Or I got Wordle. There we go. I'm tuning in there. I'm catching up to the time. So there we go. So Jesus spoke of there being many prophets, many false prophets. John spoke of many antichrists. But with all these beasts of empires and antichrists, we need to put human power in perspective. We see these great empires, and they have influenced our lives, like, right, the Babylonian, our mathematical system. I mean, so many systems in our lives are influenced by that first and great empire of Babylon, and in all the other empires as well. But we need to put human power into perspective, not just when it comes to empires, but as far as the things that are happening in our lives today, right? There's so many things that come through the news and all the clickbait things, and this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, and we get cued into all of those notifications when we need to have perspective on human power, right? I mean, I even know as a church planner in growing churches and rebuilding churches, I remember there's been times where we'll go into a place and God calls us there and things are going really well, and then somebody will say, oh, so-and-so is moving to the area and planning a church, or this people are going to do this over here. And then even in that, right, like we're partnering with God, right? It's just not some small venture, and he's doing something. He's doing great stuff, and I'll say, oh, we're going to fail now. And I'll get that in my mind, and I'll think about something. It's never happened. The things that I worry about, like this worst case scenario stuff, anybody ever struggle with that? You don't have to raise your hand. I'll be my own club. Where I just go down the road of this is going to happen now and this is going to happen. That stuff never happens. If it did, it'd be terrible because I'd go through it twice, right? All the time I thought about it and then it actually happened. But we need to put human power into perspective. We need to put the human economy into perspective. We need to put it all into perspective, like the things that are keeping you and I up at night, the things that are causing fear in your and I's lives, the things that are causing anxiety in us. We need to put those things into perspective, into the perspective that we realize there's always a greater throne. No matter how great the thing seems that's coming at us, there's always a greater throne. And the thing that has us or us is not on it. So remember in Nebuchadnezzar's dream, the stone came in and crushed the feet, and it was all cast down. Verse 9 of Daniel 7 says, as I looked, thrones were set in place, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was as white as snow. The hair of his head was white like wool. His throne was flaming with fire, and its wheels were all ablaze. A river of fire was flowing, coming out from before him. And thousands upon thousands attended him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. And the court was seated, and the books were opened. So Daniel saw the fourth beast and the 11 horns in a vision until they were cast down, and then he saw God. That's something that's repeated over and over again, maybe not in this extreme way, but it's repeated over and over again every day of our lives, is that we see all of this stuff happening, and then we do what we're most made to do, which is then we look upon God. We look upon him, and he is faithful and he's good. You in this audience here and in this church, you have testimony that when things became too great, when you became too overwhelmed, or the sickness started to overtake you, or the money was all gone, or the fights seemed like they were going to just boil over into extremity, and then all of a sudden you stopped and you got a view of God and everything changed. Or you would say like David that your life was in a pit, you were stuck in the mud, and then you called out to God and he rescued you. Nothing changed except where we put our attention. And so Daniel has clarity and perspective that there's a higher throne. So the Ancient of Days took his seat, it says. Now it doesn't say that anybody else took a seat. Why? Because everybody else was on their face or before him as they were supposed to be. But it shows a picture of God shining in all of his splendor and glory, with fire flowing and millions attending and standing before him. Revelation 4 and 5 in the New Testament details John's vision of God in his throne room with attention given to a scroll. And the attention is on who is worthy to break the seal of the scroll. The scroll has been described as the title deed to earth. In other words, the earth does not seem to be under the ownership of God. And so somebody needs to open this title deed. Just like if you buy a home or an apartment or something, you have a title deed, or even your car. You have a title deed of that, and whoever has that title deed owns it. And so the picture is that the title deed must be opened by somebody. And as John is looking into this vision of heaven, he sees God on the throne, and they say, who will open the scroll? And it says all throughout heaven and earth, no one was able to open the scroll. And John starts to weep. Because he knows that, can things really stay this bad forever? Like, are things really never going to get better? You know, is cancer always going to be able just to ravage those that I love? Is there always going to be division on the earth? Is there always going to be war upon the earth? Is death always going to rule and reign? Am I always going to have this hanging over me? And yet an attendant comes to John and says, hey man, don't weep. Don't weep. See, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has triumphed. He is able to open the scroll and its 7 seals. And then it says that they sang a new song of, you are worthy to take the scroll and to open its seals because you were slain. And with your blood you purchased for God's persons from every tribe and language and people and nation. And then in a loud voice, they were saying, worthy, worthy, worthy is the Lamb who was slain to receive power and wealth and wisdom and strength and honor and glory and praise. That's real. And yet we're so distracted. That's real. Now, the picture in Daniel 7 is not a picture of the great white throne judgment, but it's actually the beginning of the judgments of those that have rejected Christ upon the earth. You can read about it in Revelation chapter 6 through 18. In verse 11, it says, then I continued to watch because of the boastful words the horn was speaking. I kept looking until the beast was slain and its body destroyed and thrown into the blazing fire. What? The one that ravaged the earth, the one that seemed like such a big deal, is now just pushed aside. I mean, haven't you found that true, that when you set your gaze upon God, when you set your gaze upon that is truly worthy of you, that the thing just kind of fades away and it's not so big anymore? So it will be with the Antichrist. Now, the Antichrist will speak great things against God and even declare himself God. But he'll be cast into the lake of fire. By the way, best practice here, verse 11, continue to watch, keep looking, it says in verse 11. What's hard is that we gain perspective here, but it doesn't seem like enough, because the pain that you experience from these empires we're reading of, or the people that are ruling your life or hurting you, or things that have happened to you, what's hard is that you're still going through it. It's like when you're backpacking or hiking and somebody says, you're almost there. You're like, well, that's great, but I'm still here. I'm still in pain. But the key is to keep watching. Because every empire, every knee, every ruler, every kingdom that is not as God's will bow before him and go down. In verse 12 of chapter 7 of Daniel, it says, the other beasts had been stripped of their authority, but were allowed to live for a period of time. In my vision at night, I looked, and there before me was one like a son of man, coming with the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient of Days and was led into his presence. This is speaking of Jesus, the Messiah. He was given authority, glory, and sovereign power. All nations and peoples of every language worshipped him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and the kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. So Daniel is seeing Jesus Christ, the Messiah, coming into his kingdom. And Jesus, most often, when he referred to himself as the Son of Man. And so that's why people got so upset, the religious rulers, and they put him to death, actually, is because he called himself the Son of Man. And then he referenced this passage in Daniel. You'll see me coming in the clouds. You'll see the Son of Man. And so the Great Commission that Jesus spoke of, right? He said, go into all the earth, for all authority has been given to me. He's referencing Daniel 7, what we say here. Now, what's hard is that Daniel's still disturbed. Why? Because he says, man, I thought captivity was tough. And yet there's a time coming where there's all of these things happening, all these empires that don't follow God. In verse 15, it says, I, Daniel, was troubled in spirit, and the visions that passed through my mind disturbed me. I approached one of those standing there and asked him the meaning of all this. So he told me and gave me the interpretation of these things, the four great beasts. Now this next section we're going to read through pretty quickly because we've already unpacked much of this. Four great beasts are four kings that will rise from the earth, but the holy people of the Most High will receive the kingdom and will possess it forever. Yes, forever and ever. So we've read today that the kingdoms that will rule over the earth, what happens with them. But in the end, it's the saints that will receive the kingdom and rule. That actually, those that are a part of God's kingdom will rule. Think about that. That the things that seem so great in our lives, that rule over us, you actually will rule if you're a part of what God is doing and part of Jesus. You see, Adam and Eve couldn't rule the earth the way God set out humans to do. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob couldn't rule the earth in the way that God set them out to do so. And yet Jesus did. And so in the end, people again will become human, truly human. Whereas right now, God says, no, your kingdoms aren't human. Jesus, the one that is God, that became a human and joined God and humans together for all of eternity, now as you follow him, you'll be truly human. In verse 19, it says, then I wanted to know the meaning of the fourth beast, which was different from all the others and most terrifying, with its iron teeth and bronze claws, the beast that crushed and devoured its victims and trampled underfoot whatever was left. So the fourth beast is the Roman Empire and the revived Roman Empire. Verse 20, I also wanted to know about the 10 horns on its head and about the other horn that came up, before which 3 of them fell, the horn that looked more imposing than the others, and that had eyes and a mouth that spoke boastfully. As I watched, this horn was waging war against the holy people and defeating them. So Revelation 13:7 would be a parallel, insight into what we see here in Daniel 7 verse 20. And there's differing views of who the holy people are, because it says that the Antichrist overcomes them, and it's hard. You hear Jesus say, no one, even the gates of hell will not prevail over the church, right? And so I think the holy people here, possibly tribulation saints, they could be a redeemed Israel, but again, humility as far as that. Humility as far as what we see here. Until the Ancient of Days came, in verse 22, and pronounced judgment in favor of the holy people of the Most High, and time came when they possessed the kingdom. He gave me this explanation: the fourth beast is a fourth kingdom that will appear on earth. It will be different from all the other kingdoms and will devour the whole earth, trampling it and crushing it. The 10 horns are 10 kings who will come from this kingdom. After them, another king will rise, different from the earlier ones. Speaking of the Antichrist. I know this can be, you see these layers here, but it's just saying the same thing. He will subdue 3 kings. He will speak against the Most High and oppress his holy people and try to change the set times and the laws. The holy people will be delivered into his hands for a time, times, and half a time. So that's 3.5 years. And so that's where you get, if you've heard of like the time of tribulation, 3.5 years of tribulation during the end times. What will happen is that the Antichrist, we believe, will make a treaty and there'll be peace for 3.5 years and everything will seem good. And, there's even a guy right now in England, and, he's like, people are saying this guy's the Antichrist because he's doing such and such. No, that guy is like born and raised in Indiana, and, he's just like, which somebody from the U.S. could get there, but it's just, they're like, oh, this is the thing. No, listen, the Antichrist is going to be somebody that it's just so smooth. It's not going to, be set up that you're just kind of like, oh man, this is evil or whatever, or this is weird. You're just going to be like, man, this person's just makes stuff that happen. It's just flowing good. This is so good. Just peace. Yeah, this is the way it's supposed to be. And, in Jesus' time, people they knew the word of God, they had set their mind, they were deceived and they didn't recognize God when he showed up. They got pushed another way. And so it's important that we keep our hearts cued in to God and what he's doing and knowing him, because, right, it's counterfeit. So the Antichrist is a counterfeit, right? You can have anything you've ever wanted. And there it is. It's just happening. Well, this must be from God. Is it? Is it really? We read the way that God works here, and it's not the way of the world. And so we'll look more in depth in Daniel 9 and in other places to be able to look more into what the Antichrist does. But the court will sit and his power will be taken away in next week too. So if you're into this stuff, here we go. Several weeks of it. If you're not, dive in and eat and kind of tie into it, because it's important that your theology is informed in this, because it absolutely affects so much. But the court will sit and his power will be taken away and completely destroyed. Then the sovereignty, power, and greatness of all the kingdoms over heaven will be handed over to the holy people of the Most High. His kingdom will be an everlasting kingdom, and all rulers will worship and obey him. This is the end of the matter. I, Daniel, was deeply troubled by my thoughts, and my face turned pale, but I kept the matter to myself. So those that are a part of the everlasting kingdom of the Most High will rule with Christ over the earth. Dallas Willard, teacher and philosopher and writer, one of my favorites, he says that in this life it's training for reigning. That as we follow after Jesus Christ, we're being trained to reign with him. Think about that. Like everything that you're going through, you're being trained to reign with him. That's the picture that we see, is that the followers of Jesus will reign and rule over the earth. And yet part of that is that we also suffer with him, right? What did Paul say? He says, I want to know Christ. He says he considers everything else, all that he's ever had, rubbish or dung, that he may know Christ. And he wanted to know him even in his sufferings, like he wanted to know him in every way. And so, how do we take all of this home? Well, settle whose kingdom you're a part of. Really dial in and just say, man, not just like, hey, well, yeah, I believe in Jesus and I believe in the kingdom, but in other words, like, how do you live? Like, if someone were to, without you telling anybody anything, if they were just to investigate your life and my life and just say, what do you give attention to? Where are you getting your notifications that your cues of what you do throughout the day and those things? What kingdom would they say you were a part of? Would they have evidence that you're a part of God's kingdom and a part of what he was doing? That you're responsive to him, that you're a part of this place, that that's how you see what is real truth? Or are you caught up in these kingdoms that are fading away? That there's just a vapor of, and everything within those is thrown into the fire. That's real. See, we're so arrogant. We think that this world is what it's all about. No, listen, what's this happening in this world is influenced by the other world. This isn't the big show. This is the side show. We think we're so big, and yet God says, what you've done, people, is beasts. It's beastie. It's not even human. We need a Savior. That's why Jesus Christ has come. That's why his kingdom is coming again. And yet all of that can be terrifying, what we're reading, if you're not surrendered to Jesus Christ. And if you're surrendered to him, you say, Maranatha, come quickly, Lord. This place is jacked up. Seriously. How bad does it have to get? How delusional do we have to get? How demonic do we have to get in the way that things are going today, away from God's intention and what God has designed? And yet, are you entertained? Are you being entertained by the world? Is it what has your attention? That which is fake, that which is not lasting? Or are you cued in on that which is lasting? Because I'll tell you, these empires of the world, these things, they don't love you. They actually tear you down. Right? In Proverbs, it talks about the young man that goes by the house of the adulteress, right? And there's no wisdom in him. And everything looks good, but then it says that, like, all throughout those chapters in Proverbs, it says everything looks good and beautiful, but her feet are in the grave. And everybody that goes there goes to death. What a picture of the world. It all looks good, and yet it's all planted in death. It's all planted in death. Whereas you have Jesus, not hiding anything, lifted up on a cross for all to see. The most clear place where you can see what God is like is the cross. Completely vulnerable, open to those that he has created. I lay down everything for you. I give everything for you because I love you and I created you. Now come to me. And yet we give ourselves so easily to that which is temporary. And so settle whose kingdom you're a part of. And then apply remembering that there's always a higher throne. You know, around the Ancient of Days, the throne, there was glory and fire. There was a river of fire. Recognize that the things that seem so big to you and I today, the fear, the anxiety, the things that seem the up and down of the economy in the world, these things, realize that you have the fire that's a river around God, and it's lit up. And then you have these things that seem so big, they're like flickers of light. They're like fireflies, people, compared to a blazing bonfire. Think about that. What is worth you? What is worth you? What is worth me? Jesus has made us strong.